everybody, we got an amazing show lined up for you today. Our guest today is a gentleman that reached out to me from Australia. How did this all start? I mean, what got you into deciding, hey, I'm going to do a paranormal podcast?
Funny story. I feel like a lot of people probably start their stories with saying, it's a funny story. Mine's it's a bit bizarre.
Speaking of abductions, what do you think is going on there?
I think it's that thing of there's so many differing accounts that, yeah, there most likely would be different extraterrestrials. You know, we're not just talking about, it's not just like us and them.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal Podcast. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you all for joining us, and special thank you goes out to all of you who continue to support the podcast and continue to spread the word. Always remember, if any of you out there have experiences of your own that you'd like to share, feel free to email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com. Again, paranormalportalradio@gmail.com, and you too could be a guest on the show. I'm really excited for this opportunity to talk with our guest, who also has a podcast, and I'm speaking of Dylan from the Paranormal Thoughts Podcast. Hey Dylan, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Nah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited. I love getting to talk to like-minded people like yourself and a fellow podcaster as well. It's always a good time.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun to share thoughts and share ideas about all of this stuff, because I know that, especially for me, like when I got into this, I was like, well, I know the paranormal. I know about this stuff. I can do a show. And then you start doing it and you start hearing the stories, you start digging deeper, and you realize that there's just so much we have no clue about. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like I burnt through the content that I could speak quite fluently and very quickly, because it goes so deep and it's just so wide. And even speaking with someone on a particular topic, you'll then speak to someone else that same day about that same thing. It's a completely different experience, you know, and you're trying to make sense of all these really unusual situations and experiences. It's a lot of fun, but you often, it's not really the thing you get into to find answers, because we're always just kind of left with more questions you kind of find.
yeah, and the deeper the rabbit hole goes, the more you realize that there's so much we can't know, and maybe never will know. But I love the journey, and I think you're probably very much the same. But I gotta ask you, for you,
It's a funny story. I feel like a lot of people probably start their stories with saying, it's a funny story. Mine's it's a bit bizarre. I mean, I've always been a fan of podcasts ever since they've become somewhat popular, and I never really wanted to do one at the time. But I mean, my background is audio production, so I had all the equipment, and I was driving home late one night listening to some paranormal podcast, and I was just feeling kind of inspired and, I don't know, just excited, I suppose. So I kind of just got home and I just sat down in front of a microphone and just started speaking, almost like an audio journal, which is really strange because I didn't really have any ambition to do anything like that. But I just felt like it was something I just needed to do, was just to record some thoughts at that time. And then I might have spoken for maybe half an hour. I didn't really know what any of it was. You know, I didn't have an intro and outro because I didn't know what it was. It was just me speaking. And then sort of saved it, went about whatever else I was doing that night. And I thought, I'm going to just post that on the internet, which is a really weird thought to do. But I just thought, I don't know, it was more, it wasn't like a decision that I felt like I was actively making. It was just something, it was just a need or something. It kind of happened really organically. And then literally I titled the file as I exported it out of the computer as Paranormal Thoughts, because that's literally what it was. I was speaking to my thoughts on the paranormal. And then I just chucked the word podcast at the end and uploaded it to the internet. And I was like, am I doing a podcast now? And then people kind of found that, started to listen, and then it's kind of, and that was back in 2016. So it's been 6 years now of doing Paranormal Thoughts, which has been, I mean, from that night of doing that first journal entry, I guess you could call it, to where I've come to now with it. I had no idea that the people I'd speak to, the topics that I've done extensive research into to come on here and educate people and inform people, to just, it's amazing, really, that it's gone on this long and people are here listening. But I think it's the paranormal. It's a passion, It's not just a hobby or an interest. It's something that definitely from doing the podcast has become a pretty big part of my life.
Yeah, it is. It's really a journey, though, and I guess that's it, for me. I've had so many personal experiences, and so that certainly has helped to shape my journey and to help to shape my curiosity into this. Have you had experiences of your own?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like it's one of those things where you talk to anyone and, you get them comfortable enough, people do start to open up. But I feel like, a lot of people have had, or they know of someone who's had an experience that doesn't quite add up. They kind of can't come to a worldly conclusion per se. But I remember being a kid and living with my parents in their house. And for a few years, we had a few family members pass quite not far apart, you could say. And always after that time, a lot of activity seemed to linger around the house. I remember one evening being downstairs eating dinner at the kitchen table. So both my parents, my sister and I, no one else is in the house, and we're all eating, and we can hear clear as day these footsteps just walking wow. throughout and we all just kind of look at each other and we're like, yep, but this is only ever after we kind of had someone pass. But even weirdly enough, my parents had a dog that they had to sadly put down, and this was like a pretty bizarre situation. So they have a 2-story house, and my mum and dad were in their study, which is at the bottom of the stairs, and they heard a dog coming down the stairs. And obviously it's a very different sound to a human, because when dogs kind of go downstairs, she was a Scottish Terrier, so she was very, very stumpy, very little, and she'd kind of go like down the stairs. It wasn't like a footstep. And they're like, there's no dog in this house right now. And just like weird things like that, sort of just like these imprints from entities passing, I feel, was always kind of the initial experiences. And then as I got older and became very interested in the paranormal, I kind of started to reach out and try to have experiences from going on ghost tours, ghost hunts, and doing things along those sort of lines. I guess trying to, you're probably the same. When you start to have these experiences, you want them to sort of happen more because you're trying to make sense of it. And when it's kind of like the more you experience it, the more you can kind of sort of get a bit of faith behind what you're actually, because those footsteps, you could easily go, oh, that could have been something. But when it continually happens over a course of time, you start to think like, well, it's just, it's one of those things you have to experience it to really believe it, because it's very easy for people to sort of blow things off like that, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think oftentimes my pet theory is that probably everybody has had paranormal experiences, but people are very adept at dismissing things that don't fit into their paradigm. Like, geez, why did my cereal bowl move? That shouldn't have happened. Well, I must have just been looking at it weird, or some other explanation. They'll rapidly discuss it away because that's safer. Because I think that a lot of times these things happen and people find themselves in unknown territory. They're in an awkward place because suddenly the rules just changed. And how do you adapt to that? And I think that people's reality is really a security. Like, people will rapidly defend their paradigm because that's the place they know. And this stuff happens and it stands everything on its head. And so I think a lot of people have these experiences, but not, a lot of paranormal experiences are not poltergeist activity. It's just odd little things happening, or sounds, or sensations, or, I don't know, just things like that. I think weird smells or cold spots, and those are easy to explain away because, there's things like drafts and stuff, and I think people defend their paradigm very vehemently because that's the security part. But for me, and what the experiences really did for me was make me go, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. There's something happening where the things we know, the rules we count on are just kind of suspended. And suddenly these other things happen. And I think that these things are incredibly profound and powerful because I think, obviously there's something going on that we don't understand, but I think at its fundamental level, it's demonstrating that reality may not be exactly as we believe it is. Like, it might be far more malleable or a fluid and not as concrete. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I think you're very correct in saying that people could easily chalk a lot of this up to just, I must have moved my keys, like I must put them in a weird spot or things like that. And I totally understand that because I do that too. Anything more and more over the years as I've been interested in the paranormal, I have become more and more skeptical by just default. And I feel like for me, that's a good system because when you are so deep into the stuff, you can get a bit, I don't know, the water starts to become very muddy.
Yes.
And everything can almost become, because that's the thing, when people know that you're the paranormal guy, I've had friends say, oh, my kettle turned on by itself this morning. And I'm like, okay, well, that could be something, but you probably have a faulty kettle. Approaching it like that, like, have you ever had anything else happen? No, my kettle was turned on by itself. I'm like, well, sure, it could be a number of things, but you might just need a new kettle. Kind of approaching it like that in a lot of sense, because I think, yes, a lot of the stuff can be, there's always other explanations. But as you were just saying, like with cold drafts and all like strange noises, it's like you have to take a step back and go, well, if all of these things are happening within this location, like you're getting your drafts, your noises, seeing apparitions, that's when you need to really think about it. Like, okay, there's all these different elements to this. There might actually be something rather than just my friend's kettle going off. It's all a part of depends what the situation is. And that's the way I always approach it, is like, if you have a few pieces, there might be, a picture kind of starting to take place here with this puzzle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's a great point too. I think that it's obviously there's plenty of people that will challenge it. So I think it's kind of incumbent upon us to challenge all of this stuff and to really push it against a lot of like litmus tests, because if we're going to be presenting things, to the public, we got to do what we can, and when you're talking to experiencers, you really can't do that in an active way, I don't think, on the show, because I don't know how we can stand in judgment and say, well, no, this isn't what you experienced. But at the same time, when I'm presenting my own experiences on the show, I go through the things that I tried to challenge it against, at least to some extent. And I look at things the same way, because I think, as you very correctly stated, this field is really muddy because there's a lot of ideas out there. And while I think they're all interesting, I think that some of them just go so far off of the norm that they may be right, and I can't say they're not or they are, but I just don't know that that's the right place to start. If the path leads there through a series of events, then I guess you got to follow it where it goes. But I think that we are kind of gatekeepers in a sense, having these shows and putting material out there. And I'll be the first to say, look, I've done interviews that I'm fascinated with the subject matter. But, well, there's a couple of tiers to this. First of all, I know I've interviewed people that just wanted to be on the show. that maybe that I really had a strong feeling that, wait, the things they're describing, I just have never heard before anywhere. And so to me, it really comes off as like a fabrication of sorts. And those are hard to, put out there because I take a lot of pride in the show, and I don't want to just put everything out there that somebody chooses to tell me, because I feel like I do have an obligation to put out, if I can't subscribe to it at all, then is it in good conscience? Can I put it out there and say, hey, look, this is some more paranormal stuff for you guys, when I'm questioning it myself? And so it gets kind of touchy, because I don't want to be, putting myself in a position of authority, but I do want my listeners to know that what I put out there is legitimate, or as legitimate as I can, give them. You know what I mean? Does that make sense, or am I just rambling?
No. I'm in the exact same boat. I've spoken to multiple people, and I mean, you might be 5 minutes into the interview and go, this is never going to see this is never going to hit the internet. But it's just because, it's that thing of you don't really know their motive for speaking to you. And I'm always, it's a difference between you reaching out to someone who you might have found online, they have an interesting story, or if someone's hit you up as well. Like there's a lot of different people wanting different things, and just sometimes people are just their stories and their theories are so out there, but I can't even, as you said, like you can't even get your head around. So it's kind of, we are sort of gatekeepers, but I guess it's just you're putting out a product for people to enjoy, and it's like anything. When your name, your brand is this show that you put everything into, you want people to be able to listen to that and know that they're getting the best that could possibly be, and not trying to, as we said, sort of muddy the water even more with people who may be a little bit, who knows? But even people have asked me, I've done a lot of interviews with alien abductees. I'll put the word out, like if you've had experience, you'd like to come on and talk, or even I've offered to talk to people, which I have done without even recording, just so someone could hear their story. Mm-hmm. And people ask me quite often, well, do you believe them? And I wouldn't post the episode if I didn't, but the way I tell people is, who am I to say that this person hasn't experienced this? This is their truth, Yes. What they're experiencing to them is real, whether or not it's actually a physical thing or not, and who's to say that any of these abductions are potentially even all physical, but it's their truth, and I'm giving these people the platform. But yes, I have spoken to people even with that stuff and kind of gone, this doesn't feel right. And I think you just get a sense, like, yes. We're all human, even if you're talking like we are now over the ocean. You can just tell when someone's maybe putting it on, or but it's a very hard thing within the paranormal, is trying to find people who are doing the right thing, and wanting to speak about it. And it's a tricky one. I guess it just comes with the territory, doesn't it?
But I think these stories are amazing, and I always take a great deal of pride in the fact that people do trust us. It's like this huge, trust that people put in us to say, hey, look, here's a story that happened to me. And you must have experienced this as well on doing your show, that so many times people say afterwards, it's like, oh my God, that felt so amazing. I've been carrying this around for, and fill in the blank for the number of years, but sometimes it's even decades that people have had these stories and had nowhere to go with them. And so it really ends up being this incredibly cathartic experience.
Yeah, I know, right? It's a lot of weight, I guess, as what we do to sort of have, and you said, like, I've spoken to a young woman with a pretty traumatic alien abduction encounter, and she had never mentioned it to anyone in person before, not to her family, anything like that. And she spoke to me, and then after we finished recording, she said, I'll probably never speak about this again now. Like, I've just done that's it. She was talking on Reddit and sort of about the experience, but never actually vocalizing her experience, just because it's so it's really heavy, and she's got her professional life and a life, so she's trying not to let that weigh on her too much. And me, like that's the whole thing, like going back to that very first episode I ever posted, to then having someone like that come forward with this amazing, terrifying experience and trusting me to put that out and do it justice is never in a million years that I think this is kind of where things would go in my lifetime. But I'm very honored to get to do this particular work. Who's to say that all these experiences are exactly that? They might not be a traditional alien abduction as we've sort of known.
Speaking of abductions, what do you think is going on there? I mean, it's an incredible phenomena, and it's sometimes really hard to differentiate in some cases whether it's spiritual or whether it's extraterrestrial. Like some of the activities seem to like bleed through between phenomenon, and it's kind of hard to put a finger on. Well, this is what it seems like to me, but I always wonder, what are they doing? And do you have any insights that you've gleaned through the years of doing this?
It's like the longer I look into it, the harder to nail it down exactly. Mm-hmm. Just becomes harder and harder, because there's a lot of I guess you could say traditional experiences. People seeing lights in the sky, seeing similar creatures and so on. Even the abductions sounding similar, but then you'll speak to someone who believes that none of this is actually physically happening to them. It happens through like astral traveling, or someone will describe a particular being that I've never heard anything like that before. And it's a very wide net. And I feel like when you throw it out, what you might actually be bringing back in isn't exactly what you might think. Who's to say that one of these experiences is even potentially extraterrestrial? I think it's that thing of there's so many differing accounts that, that most likely would be different extraterrestrials. We're not just talking about, it's not just like us and them.
Right.
Clearly, I think it's a lot of, different species, or, whatever you kind of want to call them, and where they're from, of course. But who's to say that all these experiences are exactly that? They might not be a traditional alien abduction as we've sort of known. I think for sure the breeding kind of idea that sperm and eggs are being taken. I've spoken to multiple people who have had that exact thing happen. So I definitely think there is something amongst that, whether or not it's a breeding program for themselves or for something completely different. Mm-hmm. I've looked into the theory that they are the creators as well, which is also very interesting when you go back to this sort of ancient astronaut sort of theory as well. There's a lot within all that. And this is, even just what I've just said there, that's huge. There's some people who only care about a portion of that, and that would be their entire research, but all in all, I think I sometimes feel like I have somewhat of an answer when I speak to someone, and I'm like, that doesn't fit in my construct, and what does that mean? And you kind of do get a bit comfy when you feel like you have a grasp on something. It is a bit hard to then let that go and then start to consider other options. I guess the big thing is, it's if everyone was having the exact same experience, that would be pretty freaky, to be perfectly honest. That would be strange, I think. But the fact that people experience things in many different ways, and even the difference between someone having a positive experience and a negative could be a completely mindset. I feel like a lot of people I speak to are quite open to the fact that this is happening to them. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, it happens to them as a young age, through that entire life. And it's almost, I wouldn't say the norm, but it's the norm to them. And there's a bit of acceptance within that. And there's other people like that young lady I was mentioning just before who wanted nothing to do with this, and it was actually it was really frightening for her, and really quite a barrier in her life. And who's like, it's that thing then of like, why are some people having positive experiences in some regard, or they're having this like acceptance kind of, they're accepting of this situation, but then there's other people who, are terrified of this. And you go, well, is this even the same thing again? It's hard to sort of say, because I ask them what they think, and people then obviously ask me. And what I kind of keep coming back with is kind of the sort of God complex, the creator complex, definitely some sort of breeding, and also just a general interest by the sounds of it, like a lot of, whatever they are, they've definitely, I think they see that there's something within us that they don't have, and they definitely seem interested.
Yeah. It's something that's always perplexed me, because I mean, we're dealing with races that have, such a technological advantage, and it seems like they've cracked a lot of the keys of the universe. Like, obviously, if they're coming from different star systems, then they know how to travel in such a way as that it doesn't take, thousands of generations to do it. And they obviously are so advanced to where we are. And it seems kind of bizarre that they would still need something from us, but they clearly seem to. And it's really perplexing, because, it's kind of, maybe it's like Michio Kaku said, on some show that I heard him interviewed. And I think this is a profound way of looking at it. It's like, you might be dealing with something that is thousands or millions of years advanced to us. And they may disregard us as the ants in the anthill. Like, do we, when we're walking down the street, introduce ourselves to the ants as we're passing by? And of course we don't, because they're just ants. And, maybe it's something like that, where they just look at us like, we're just part of the biology of what's going on here, and they're just running tests because they want to understand the ecology of our planet. But I don't know. It's very curious, because obviously it has such a profound impact on people. Those people that deal with the abductions and are trying to piece their life together when they're in such a position of basically victimization. And it's really heartbreaking. But I wish I understood what was going on in these situations, because maybe then I would know how to, console these people or help them understand. But it's just one of those painful realities that we seem to have in our world.
100%. And that theory that, we are the ants to them definitely would make a lot of sense based off what we sort of know, whether we haven't had this, as far as we know, there hasn't been this sit down with us and them that we are super aware of. And it's always interesting when I speak to people and I'm like, who have actually had contact where they've been able to ask them questions, and that opens up a whole other can of worms, because they might get some answers. And I'm like, I don't know what that even means. What's that have to do with anything, but then, it's really, even now, like, it's a massive rabbit hole. And even just how it then branches into spirituality and religion. I mean, like, I had a really weird experience right after I started the podcast, where I had a lot of synchronicities. And right before I started the podcast, I became really interested in the theory with how synchronicities relate to the paranormal. Like, they're everywhere. I mean, synchronicities can be found in every aspect of life. But I really, I don't know, it's just something about a meaningful coincidence that really stuck to me at that time. And the more I was looking into it, I just found so many interesting examples of this happening. And I came across a researcher who I was lucky enough to have on my show. It was kind of like once I had him on, it was kind of like the whole podcast came full circle, which was pretty cool, the name of Mike Cleland. And Mike has done research into owls and UFO abduction and how synchronicity plays a big part in all of that. And it's a pretty big topic, but I was really interested in all of his work and a bunch of synchronicity. And I was driving home one night and I was thinking about a previous podcast I think I'd listened to earlier that day, it was a similar thing what we're doing now. It was an interview, and the interviewer asked the researcher who was on about alien abduction and whether or not they had an experience. And they answered, if I have, I don't remember. You know, I very much so could have. It would make sense because I'm somehow fixated on this particular topic. There might be some sort of relationship there, but I don't remember having that. So I'm driving home and I'm thinking about if I've had an experience or not.
Right.
And also in the car, I'm also listening to a podcast. And I remember the podcast was with Rob and Trish McGregor, who are another a couple who are paranormal investigators, done a lot of research into aliens and UFOs, kind of everything, but they're there talking about synchronicity on this podcast as well, which was super, once again, another kind of synchronicity. It's just all, you know, I feel like once you're kind of in a bit of a cycle with this stuff, things kind of start to show themselves. But I'm thinking about all of this, and I'm thinking about, thinking about all of this, about 2 minutes from getting home, and I see an owl fly in front of my car and land on a street sign.
Oof.
So I pull over and I go over, I'm looking at it, and I reckon I've never seen owls in this area where I've lived other than around this time. It was super weird. But I get out, I look at this owl and I go, okay, I don't really know what you're trying to tell me here. But all I could think of is I was listening to this Rob and Trish McGregor podcast about synchronicity and alien abduction. I'm thinking about if I've had an experience or not. I don't remember. And then I see an owl, which is a bunch of research I've been doing into how that plays into the abduction phenomena and all of that. And I kind of just finished driving home, and I actually recorded like a bit of audio on my phone and then made a podcast about that. It was very new. I feel like the podcast was maybe a month or so old, but it was really weird. And then from there on, for that next week, I had a bunch of other weird synchronicities. I kept seeing like owls everywhere, not physical owls, but just pictures of owls in weird places, not where you typically see. I had this really vivid alien abduction dream that same week as well. And I did at that end of that week see another owl, and this thing literally flew right in front of me like it did when I was driving the car to make itself noticeable. Landed in a tree, and I was with my now wife and my mother were going for a walk, and that was the only two people I'd mentioned seeing this owl a week earlier too. And once again, we're on this walk. I'd actually had thought to myself, it'd be amazing if we saw something on this walk, because I was just having a really strange week. When this owl literally, it didn't have to fly in front of us to show itself, but it did. And I'm like, I don't really know what any of this means, but I feel like it was definitely, I kind of took that into working on my podcast, feeling like it was a brand new thing. It's something I should be doing. I need to be doing it. And I looked a little bit into the prospect of maybe having some experiences as well, but I've never really gotten a clear sign to any of that. But it was just this really weird thing that it might not even have anything to do with abductions, but the way that all lined up was pretty hard to ignore, So when you asked about the whole abduction thing, it's like all these different theories, but then it's like there's this whole other thing with synchronicity that I, for one, have experienced and can't really make any sense of, but that was a very profound moment and something that even just talking about it now, I haven't really thought about it for a while, but it gives me kind of like goosebumps. That's the sort of feeling it's like the universe is just screaming at you. It's trying to tell you something, and you kind of just have to listen and try to figure that out. But yeah, as I said, I kind of just put that energy and that time into making my podcast really, because I felt like if I could do some good or uncover some answers through that, then maybe that's what I'm meant to be doing. But who really knows?
No, I think, and it's incredible how much the owl symbology plays into that too with abductees. And I've heard theories of it that it's kind of a memory replacement, that perhaps it wasn't an owl at all, but that was changed in the eyes of, or in the understanding of the experiencer, because that's a normal thing. Seeing an owl, and maybe that's, I don't know how it works to, change memories, but maybe the transition from a gray alien to like an owl is a pretty easy thing to do. I don't know, But it is curious because owl symbology comes up all the time. And I don't think that's just by chance. It's got to mean something. You're right. And it's curious.
We did not come here as enemies. We came only with friendly intentions. To talk. To ask your aid.
Our aid?
Yes. Your aid for the whole universe. But your governments of Earth refused even to accept our existence. Even though you've seen us, heard our messages, you still refuse to accept us.
Why is it so important that you want to contact the governments of our Earth?
Because of death. Because all you of Earth are idiots.
Now, have you seen a UFO?
See, I feel like there have been times where I have seen lights in the sky before, but I feel like it's so brief, and I feel like I'm looking for it too, so it's hard to... Yeah. I've never seen anything concrete, put it like that. I wouldn't go to say I have definitely, but I feel like from driving around, I have seen some strange things, but not enough for me to say... I've definitely had an experience, unfortunately. I'd love to see something that, like, when you hear about people who can watch the sky and for, minutes, if not even hours, see lights doing these interesting patterns, like that would be, that'd be insane to see.
Yeah, no, I've actually seen a UFO up close and personal, and it was an incredible experience. And believe me, it wasn't until it occurred to me that I was out in the mountains at a cabin when this happened, and I was looking at it hovering above a tree very close to me through 4-power binoculars. And then it occurred to me that, like, I'm the only thing going on there, so chances are they were sitting there looking at me. And then I was like, okay, this is enough. I seen it. I know they're real, but I don't need this to get any more real. And then I just went inside and locked the doors and paced for hours because I'd been looking my whole life and never seen anything that I could say, yeah, that definitely was a UFO. And then all of a sudden, and this is like 8 years ago, and this is when this happened, or 9 years ago now, I guess. But it was like there. And all of a sudden, I transitioned from being a believer to a knower. And it's a hell of a thing. I don't know what they were doing there. I don't know what they were doing watching me. I don't know what they were looking for, but there they were, and there I was, and it was an incredible experience. I mean, I was all by myself up there with absolutely no one for miles. Yeah, it really was. It was incredible. But I've told this story so many times. I'd hate to be redundant again, but it's one of those things that, as far as I know, that's as far as the experience went. Like, I don't have any missing time or anything. I was awake for hours after it, just going, oh my God. And I was pacing the house just to make sure they weren't deciding to come in or something. But I mean, it was just me. And then I just finally just wound down and got exhausted and went to sleep and woke up the next day. So as far as I know, that was the extent of the experience. Now I have, after seeing the one thing, I have seen other things. Like I saw one go overhead, and maybe a year and a half later, like right over the top of where I was standing. And I could see the underside of it as it passed over. Oh. And another time I saw a bright light come down at a 90-degree angle, and that was incredible too. But those are my experiences with UFOs.
Well, I mean, that's incredible that you've had multiple. It sounds like quite up close as well, which that'd be amazing to actually, as you said, like see the underside of a craft. It just, really puts it, I guess it really puts us in that perspective, doesn't it? Of, this stuff is actually happening, and just the scope of it.
It is. And the other thing that really occurred to me was, I'd been looking my whole life up in the sky, and I grew up in a rural area, so there wasn't light pollution. I was always looking at the stars, looking up there, and I was always wondering how are other people seeing stuff, and I'm just never seeing anything. And then once I saw that UFO hovering, then after that I saw more. And this is another theme that comes up often, is that when a person has one experience, it's like they are much more prone to have more experiences. And I don't know, I don't mean to suggest that it's a confirmation bias kind of thing, like, well, you know, everything's a UFO now because I saw a UFO, but I mean, legitimately, I saw other UFO activity following that after decades and decades of looking and not seeing anything. And suddenly within a short period of time, I'm seeing more things. So did something change in me? And does something change in these individuals that have a paranormal experience and then go on to have so many others? Is it something in the awareness of the person, or is it the phenomena just becomes aware of the observer suddenly? That's the part I'm really puzzled about.
There's definitely a theme. It is pretty much the floodgates open for a lot of people, yes. I feel. Or the other thing even is, I always ask anyone who has had some unusual experience, have you had anything else, in a different yes. sort of category? And a lot of people do. A lot of alien abductees claim to have maybe like lived in a haunted house at one point, or have seen maybe a Sasquatch. Or it does seem like everything seems somehow connected, yet it's so far apart. It's really hard to grasp. I mean, when we talk about the paranormal, that's a huge topic, as we've kind of a thing that everyone knows. But when things do start to cross-pollinate, it really starts to get. I think that's when it gets really exciting. I think when you think you might be on one path, and all of a sudden it's like, hang on, this seems like a whole new thing. I don't know what that could possibly be. Like when you're looking at cryptid encounters and you come across something that resembles maybe something of the same sort of size, but then they describe a feature which is like, whoa, hang on. The thing I was just looking at didn't have wings, and now there's something. It's like, what has this person seen? It's so fascinating, and the fact that it all could be on some level connected, because it just seems like it has to be.
Yes.
That just makes it even more complexing, and kind of makes you. It's exciting. It's I have a smile on my face right now just thinking about that whole kind of how far this stuff goes and how big it really is.
Yeah, and there does seem to be a bleed through between phenomena, and that is what I find interesting too, because there are reports of Sasquatch, Bigfoot phasing out, just melting away, even when they're out in broad daylight, wide open areas, just suddenly being gone. And then you think of ghostly apparitions doing much the same thing, and then you consider UFOs. People in abduction scenarios reporting going through solid objects as if they're being phased through things, and these beings appearing out of nowhere and then melting away again, and so there are so many similarities between the phenomena, and it's a curiosity to me, and it's I don't know what to make of it for sure. I have a few pet theories on the idea, but nothing that I can substantiate by any measure, but the bleed through is important, but I think we would be kind of remiss if we didn't visit the Yowie a little bit while we got you here. So, do you talk to a lot of people that have had Yowie experiences?
Yeah, I definitely have. I've even, I just remembered the other day, I feel like, the Yowie almost here was used. I mean, it was quite a big part of my growing up. I was mentioning this to someone the other day, that we had a Cadbury chocolate that was shaped like a Yowie, and they actually were called Yowies, and inside you had like little toys you'd build.
Oh, we have those here too.
Yeah. So like you'd be at, the checkout at the grocery store, and like, you'd have this Yowie paraphernalia. Then I had my parents, my mother grew up in the Blue Mountains, which is actually a massive hotspot for Yowie sightings and UFOs. Yep. And she was kind of told by like her father, like, you don't go out after dark because there's Yowies. So it was kind of used as this thing to like get kids off the street or, out of the bush after dark. Mm-hmm. But her brothers believed that they had seen something really large in the bush one night, and had actually seen kind of like the yellow eyes of, like a cat kind of shining back at them. But these were like really big.
Ooh.
So like when I grew up sort of hearing about these stories, it was always a thing of like, Yowies are definitely a thing. And then you look into the indigenous Australian belief of all of that and how they were always just kind of here. And then, speaking to, there's a researcher here, he's in Canberra, called Tim the Yowie Hunter, and he's a paranormal researcher who stumbled across a Yowie some years ago, and that kind of started him on his whole paranormal path. I'm not sure he's actually ever seen a Yowie since, but he's kind of the Yowie guy per se. And there's even a guy not far from where I live as well who has done a lot of research and actually has a great website with a bunch of accounts dating back quite some time to pretty much as recent as you can be. Where I currently live, this development wouldn't have existed, maybe 40 years ago. So there's a lot of bushland. So there's a lot of areas around here which, 20 or so years ago, while it was still quite leafy, there's some interesting encounters of people seeing, these like 7 foot tall, massive bipedal creatures. And we don't have anything like that in Australia. We don't have any bears or anything walking around of that size. And it's so fascinating. I've heard stories of in far north Queensland, a husband and wife going on a trail walk, and they witnessed a Yowie cross in front of them, and the wife was that startled by this thing they had to actually bring like paramedics out to remove her from the scene. She just could not leave. It actually just completely rocked her world, and that was an experience that it was quite tame, you could say, just seeing this thing. But whatever it was, it's very hard to deny that she saw something, because she was that shocked by this thing. And lots of, I've heard of accounts of these things chasing people too, which would be absolutely terrifying.
Yes.
They do, it does seem like whatever this creature is, they do seem quite territorial, but also they obviously are the best camouflages, like you people go look for them, don't find anything. But, once again, we've found some great footprints. There's some cast molds of them. I think some not far from where I am, maybe about an hour or so into the hinterland of the Gold Coast. There was some great prints found up there. And I went and stayed in a cabin for a few nights up there, and I wanted to actually go do some Yowie hunting, but there was quite bad weather and a lot of the national park was closed. But even just lying in bed that night with no one else around in this cabin and just hearing the creatures outside, it's very spooky. Like, to actually go out and look for these things, I think it would be terrifying. But it's very interesting. I think what I've come to the conclusion of is it's pretty much the exact same thing as like a Sasquatch or Yeti. I think it is just it just depends on the continent, and maybe they're built for quite, especially the Yowies in sort of the tropics, probably I think a lot of people claim that there's a lot of smell to them as well. You probably smell a Yowie before you see it, probably because these things are just covered in hair and getting saturated, during these tropical storms and so on. But yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and I love that it kind of goes back to the indigenous dream time as well, because I definitely think that is, there's cave drawings of these things, it's
right.
It's really, it gives a lot of weight with the evidence, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And the gentleman you were talking about with the website, was that Dean Harrison?
That is Dean Harrison. Yes, correct.
Australian Yowie research. Yeah, he's been on the show, and he had an encounter where he was chased when he was younger, and it's gotta be just about the most hair-raising thing I've one of the most hair-raising stories I've ever heard. Just the way he describes it, and the emotion and the panic and the fear. God, and then to go and devote yourself to pursuing more of that is just like, wow. I think if I'd been chased, that'd been it. I'd been probably just became a rock collector after that or something,
Find like a nice tame pastime or something. I know, but that's the thing, isn't it? It's like people like Dean are out there really doing some great work, because whatever people are seeing, they're very profound experiences. It seems life-changing from what I can understand. And I think that also then sort of does play into, is this thing a living creature, or is it, does it then sort of mold into the paranormal? And, from people having these really profound experiences, I could, it almost does sort of play into a bit more of that. Or it could just be a creature that's, just living out in the bush and is just amazing at camouflage and just can live in its own way. But, there's tons of accounts where these things just are gone and so on, it kind of does make you think.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least they're physical part-time because they do leave prints. They do eat. They break things like trees. Common over here in the U.S. that people hear tree breaks and knocks and things like that. And so they definitely seem to be a physical being at least part of the time. And I don't pretend to know what they are the rest of the time, but I've certainly heard the stories as well. And the jury's definitely out. But whatever they are, the other thing I find, and I was talking to Kate about this when we were talking one time, Kate Moya of the Believe podcast, and I said, one of the things that really I find so profound is that I agree that they're probably of the same genus anyway and have probably been separated for tens of thousands of years or better. And yet the behaviors are so consistent around the world of what people report of these creatures doing. And that to me is just, I mean, maybe it makes sense because it's just tried and true and that's just the way it's always been for these beings. I don't know. I don't dare say creatures because they could be another type of people for all I know. But, there's such a consistency. And I find that amazing because you'd think, people that have been separated for thousands of years develop different cultures. They develop different ways of looking at things. And if, let's say, for instance, us humans, we all have a common ancestor or maybe a few common ancestors that commingled and crossed each other's paths and stuff. And then you look at the scope of the world and the differences. I mean, there's a lot of commonalities between us, of course, but the differences are incredibly profound as well. But maybe we just don't know enough about Bigfoot or Yowies and stuff to know the differences outside of some physical characteristics that seem a little varied between the different types.
Bang on. Like, that is the weirdest thing, that it is spotted all over the globe. Pretty much the exact same creature, at least by description, and also their behavior. Like the same thing over here, wood knocks, trees breaking, so on. It's the exact same thing. And that just goes to show, because, there's, as far as I know, there's only one Jersey Devil and, things like that. But this thing it's global,
right?
And how have they sort of lived in isolation from one another? And I mean, they just, it's very interesting, isn't it? Like,
it just makes me scratch my head.
I think so. And I think it plays like really into its hand that, I think we all are into something. Like, there's no reason why we're all seeing, all around the world, pretty much the exact same creature, with maybe a few differences. But, I mean, the differences start to make sense based on, climate and what it has to eat in that sort of spot and so on. But, I mean, I definitely think your Bigfoot type entity is probably one of the ones that we have a fair bit of evidence, like we've gotten hair, as we said, footprints, a lot of sightings, even just recordings. Some of the recordings, when you look at them on like a spectral analyzer, it's not in our range by any means, like anything that a human could make, or some great videos breaking down that, whatever this thing is, it's not someone in a suit because of the way the limbs move and so on. It's just, it's impossible, really, for someone trying to do a hoax anyway. Like people capturing these creatures, like I've seen videos of like whole herds of them in the middle of nowhere, like shot on a game cam, and it's like, who's going to go out into the middle of nowhere or dress up in these suits? And it's like, for the chance that someone may have seen that bit of footage, or gotten it's just, it's wild. I think there's so much evidence and so many fascinating assets to Sasquatch. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And it's great too. I love speaking to like especially, like Americans, because they always do ask about the Yowie, like I do with Sasquatch or Bigfoot, because it is like we have this relationship through that particular cryptid, which it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. It's also been really cool talking to you, brother. I really have enjoyed our chat, and I can see that, we should keep working together because these discussions are amazing, and it's a great opportunity to compare notes and just to pick your brain a little bit as well.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that. I think it's something that we all should be doing more of, is reaching out and comparing notes, because we're all speaking to a lot of the same people, but a lot of different people as well. And
right.
What we're all kind of finding, it's I think it just betters this whole topic that we've sort of all fallen into and love. But no, thank you for having me on. I've had a great time. It's great to meet up with you.
Yeah, likewise, brother. And we're just making the world a smaller place all the time.
All the time, right? Yeah.
Well, thanks again. And we'll definitely get you back, and we'll have part 2 of this discussion and continue our journey together.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Get out. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here on tonight's show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please feel free to follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Paranormal Portal Radio, as well as finding us on Twitter. We're on Twitter at Paranormal Portal, PORTL, and we'd love to have you stop by our YouTube page and subscribe and check out our shows there. We got hundreds of shows, Journeys into the Paranormal Portal, so I hope you'll check it out, guys. We're over there at youtube.com/Paranormal Portal, so hope to see you guys soon. We'll be back, of course, for more podcasts in the coming days. So we love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other. Help each other out. Find the magic in every day. And remember to laugh as much as you can.